So there I was, third morning in a row, staring at my busted mailbox like it owed me an apology. Screws ripped out, posts snapped in half, mail scattered like confetti. And just like clockwork, Karen across the street was pretending not to look while holding a bat. Yeah, a bat. Thing is, this wasn't the first time. Or the second. I'd already filed reports, talked to the HOA, even installed a camera. But she didn't stop. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I tore the whole thing out and replaced it with half an inch of reinforced steel. Let's just say the next time she swung, the wall didn't flinch. But her wrist sure did. Now before you ask, wait, how'd you even pull that off without the HOA losing it? Just wait till you hear what I did next. Cedar Pines Estates was the kind of neighborhood that looked like it had been plucked from a magazine. Every house was painted in matching pastels, every lawn perfectly manicured, and everything was regulated by the local homeowners association with an iron fist. It was a place where deviations from the norm weren't just frowned upon. They were met with hefty fines, stern letters, and, as I had come to learn, relentless harassment. At the helm of enforcing these rules was none other than Karen Miller, better known around here as HOA Karen. Karen wasn't your average neighbor. In her early 50s and always clad in sharply pressed outfits with her clipboard perpetually in hand, she prowled the streets of Cedar Pines Estates like a miniature drill sergeant. Rumor had it that if someone dared to plant a non-approved flower or hang a picture frame that didn't match, she'd be there to catch it immediately. Her passion for enforcing conformity was legendary, and unfortunately, I became her latest target. I run a small yet thriving farm stand on the edge of this meticulously regulated community. My stand isn't like the cookie-cutter storefronts you see in big cities. It's a vibrant celebration of local produce, homemade jams, and quirky, one-of-a-kind crafts. Every season, I pour my heart into creating something special, a little oasis of individuality that contrasts sharply with the uniformity of Cedar Pines. And while many might have kept their heads down, I wasn't about to let my creative expression be trampled by someone whose idea of art was a perfectly trimmed hedge. For years, I'd built up a loyal customer base that appreciated the authentic, rustic charm of my farm stand. I took pride in the fact that everything, from the hand-painted sign to the homegrown vegetables, was a testament to my hard work and the freedom to live on my own terms. But that freedom came with its price here. Karen had developed a personal vendetta against my little operation. From fining me for what she called unauthorized color schemes on my sign to reporting minor infractions that I never even knew existed, she made it clear that my way of life was not acceptable in Cedar Pines Estates. Then came the mailbox incident. My mailbox had always been a sturdy, if modest, fixture, a loyal receptacle for every important letter, bill, and handwritten note from customers. I had chosen it for its vintage charm and its homegrown feel. But then, without any warning, it became the target of Karen's wrath. Night after night, I'd return to find it completely smashed, screws torn, wood splintered, even the small American flag that hung proudly beside it was tattered and missing pieces. The digital evidence from my newly installed security camera confirmed what I'd long suspected. Karen was behind the attacks, her motive hidden behind a veneer of maintaining community standards. I couldn't let this continue. Not only was Karen attacking my means of communication, but each act was a personal insult to the very freedom I treasured. It was time to fight back in a way that would force her and everyone else to confront the absurdity of it all. The conflict had been simmering for a while now, each shattered mailbox a punctuation mark in a long paragraph of petty harassment. I had filed every report, gathered every piece of evidence, and still, Karen's destructive rampage showed no sign of slowing down. The neighbors whispered about it in hushed tones while glancing nervously at her stern silhouette as she roamed the neighborhood with her bat in hand. It was a spectacle of absurdity, one that spurred me to plan a comeback that would echo for seasons. My initial attempts at peaceful resolution, talking to the HOA, meeting with Karen, even trying to install a new mailbox, had all been met with blank stares or dismissive scoffs. Karen was relentless, as if she got off on the idea of imposing some arbitrary standard of order. I realized that if I let her bully me, she'd soon move on to take away my entire livelihood. That was when the idea struck me. If she was going to keep smashing my mailbox, I was going to replace it with something unbreakable, something that would declare, without a word, that my property was my sanctuary and that no one could tamper with it. I spent hours researching, consulting with local metalworkers and engineers, and scouring online forums for inspiration. The result was as audacious as it was ingenious. I decided to construct a new mailbox, a heavy, reinforced steel wall that would stand as a permanent fixture, impervious to any attempt at vandalism. Not only would it serve its primary function, but it would also become a statement piece, a monument to my unyielding resolve. I began by designing the structure on my computer, sketching out every detail. The mailbox was no longer just a place for letters. It was evolving into a mini fortification. I chose a design that featured a half-inch thick sheet of stainless steel, welded into a compact wall that was as functional as it was intimidating. I added intricate details: a small, built-in slot for mail that would remain secure, a bold emblem etched into the steel, signifying property of my name, everything meticulously planned to leave no doubt that this was my property and I was in control. The actual construction took several days. I hired a skilled metalworker from the area, and together we spent long hours in my workshop, cutting, welding, and polishing the steel. Every clang of the hammer and spark from the welder was a note in the symphony of my rebellion. The project became a full-time occupation, a creative burst that filled the space left by Karen's constant aggression. Neighbors watched with curiosity and growing admiration as the new steel mailbox, a veritable steel wall, took shape in my front yard. I documented the process meticulously. Time-lapse videos captured the transformation from a pile of raw metal into a sleek, modern testament to property rights. I even shared snippets on social media with captions like "Building my freedom, one weld at a time," and "When they try to break you, build something stronger." These posts began to garner attention. Supportive comments and shares flooded in, turning my personal battle into a community cause. It wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about standing up for the right to create, to express, and to live without fear of arbitrary intrusion. The night I installed the final piece was electric. Under the glow of my workshop lights, I carefully secured the newly constructed steel wall in place. Every screw was tightened, every seam polished until it gleamed. By early morning, the structure was complete, a stark, imposing barrier that replaced the fragile mailbox that Karen had so ruthlessly destroyed. I could already imagine the next time Karen would appear. There she was on her routine patrol, her bat in hand, glancing over at what used to be my mailbox, only to find, now, an unyielding sheet of steel staring back at her. I knew the impact would be immediate. The next time she tried to swing her bat, the steel wall would stand defiant, a silent rebuke that spoke louder than any fine or complaint could. By replacing my vulnerable mailbox with a steel wall, I had not only taken back control of my property, but had also sent a clear message. No one could bully me out of my right to communicate, express myself, and run my business as I saw fit. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown between arbitrary enforcement and unyielding personal liberty. As word of my steel mailbox spread, the digital and real-world buzz in Cedar Pines Estates reached fever pitch. What started as a personal battle quickly transformed into a symbol of resistance against the oppressive overreach of the HOA. Online, posts and hashtags like #SteelStrong, #NoMoreKaren, and #PropertyRights rallied support from residents who had long been under the thumb of Karen's relentless fines and petty complaints. Neighbors who had felt too afraid to speak out now found their voices amplified by the digital movement. Local news outlets arrived in droves to cover the story. Reporters captured the gleaming steel mailbox, the indomitable symbol of my defiance, and interviewed residents who expressed both admiration and relief at seeing someone finally stand up against the tyranny of arbitrary rule enforcement. "It's inspirational," one local anchor commented, "to see a homeowner take control of their destiny and build something that speaks louder than 100 fines ever could." The narrative was quickly reframed. What had begun as a vandalism spree by Karen was now a rallying cry for individual freedom and property rights. Meanwhile, Karen Miller's attempts to downplay her actions only deepened the community's disdain for her. In a series of hastily recorded videos posted to her social media accounts, she insisted that the fines were justified and that my mailbox was a disturbance to the neighborhood's order. But every video was met with rebuttals from residents and experts alike. Local property rights advocates published detailed blog posts explaining that not only was my steel wall completely legal, it was a rightful exercise of my private property rights. The digital evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, testimonials, and time-lapse videos of the construction all served to debunk her narrative. As the days turned into a week, the tension escalated further when the HOA board called for an emergency meeting to discuss my growing influence on the community and Karen's unchecked enforcement practices. The meeting was packed with frustrated residents, and heated discussions erupted over the board's perceived inability to protect individual freedoms. I attended the meeting armed with my digital dossier, a carefully compiled collection of images, videos, and written testimonials that showed exactly how Karen's actions had affected my life and the lives of many others. The board's internal conflict became public knowledge when leaked minutes revealed that several members were in favor of revising the overly strict rules that had allowed Karen to impose fines so arbitrarily. Our community is a place for creativity and individuality, not for draconian enforcement. One board member was quoted as saying in a confidential memo that soon made its way onto community forums. The pressure on the board mounted as digital petitions, signed by thousands of residents, demanded immediate reform. It was clear that the community was ready to break free from the shackles of Karen's oppressive rule. I continued to document every development, posting live updates on community social media channels and sharing behind-the-scenes footage of the HOA meeting. Supportive messages poured in from neighbors who recounted their own experiences with Karen's bullying, stories of fines for minor infractions, and relentless inspections that left them feeling demeaned. The collective narrative was clear. Arbitrary enforcement had no place in Cedar Pines Estates, and my steel mailbox was just the beginning of a larger movement for property rights. As public pressure grew, the board announced that a final public hearing would be held, an event that would decide not only my fate, but also the future of enforcement policies in our community. In the days leading up to the hearing, the online movement gained incredible momentum. Hashtags like #SteelStrong and #NoMoreCurrent trended locally, and video compilations of my steel wall installation, intercut with Karen's over-the-top reactions, became viral hits. The momentum was undeniable. Every shared post and every comment echoed the community's desire for change. With the final hearing scheduled on a crisp morning, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown between established HOA authority and the grassroots movement for individual freedom. Neighbors organized peaceful rallies outside the community center, distributing flyers and urging everyone to attend the hearing. The air was thick with anticipation. The community was ready to take a stand for creativity, innovation, and the unassailable right to private property. Every digital update reinforced the fact that this was more than just a battle over a mailbox. It was a fight for dignity, for the freedom to express oneself without fear of petty fines, and for the right to live on one's own terms. And as the day of the final hearing approached, the escalating tension promised a turning point that would forever reshape Cedar Pines Estates. The decisive moment arrived on a cool, clear morning at the Cedar Pines Estates Community Center. The boardroom was packed with HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and a determined assembly of residents, each one ready to witness the final public vote on our community's enforcement policies. With a calm, yet unyielding presence, Councilwoman Stephanie Raymond stepped to the podium, her eyes reflecting the collective resolve of a community fed up with arbitrary rule enforcement. After an exhaustive review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage of the repeated mailbox vandalism, detailed records of all fines imposed, and the impassioned testimonies of affected residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Raymond began, her voice clear and commanding. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller, specifically her relentless and unwarranted smashing of mailboxes designed to intimidate and control, were not rooted in any legitimate concern for community order, but were driven by personal bias and an abuse of power. Our community's right to private property and personal expression must be protected, and no one should be allowed to impose their will through arbitrary fines and destructive behavior. A heavy silence filled the room as Raymond continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all fines related to these acts of vandalism, and we will initiate a full disciplinary review of the practices that permitted such overreach. Furthermore, we will establish new guidelines to ensure that every resident's right to maintain their property without harassment is upheld. Today's decision is not simply about reversing a fine. It is a resounding declaration that Cedar Pines Estates will stand for fairness, accountability, and the inviolable right to self-expression. Her words resonated powerfully throughout the assembly. At that moment, a longtime community advocate, a respected voice for property rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united as one," he declared, his voice echoing with passion. "No resident should ever be forced to endure the tyranny of arbitrary enforcement. Let this vote mark the turning point, a clear signal that our community values innovation, personal freedom, and the sanctity of private property above all else. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every violation of our rights is met with swift, decisive action." His declaration was met with roaring applause from the crowd, uniting every resident in a powerful call for change. Following his address, a senior official from the local public safety department presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert testimonies, and official reports verifying that my installation of a reinforced steel mailbox was a lawful exercise of my property rights. The evidence was irrefutable. Not only were my actions legally justified, but every fine imposed on me was an abuse of power driven by personal vendetta. The Internal Affairs panel had unanimously endorsed strict measures against such arbitrary enforcement, and the full report was slated for immediate public release. Councilwoman Raymond concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Cedar Pines Estates, a community where every resident's rights and creative expressions are respected, and where public authority is exercised with fairness and integrity. Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will protect our freedoms and that no one, no matter how self-righteous, can impose their personal biases on our community. Together, we stand for justice, transparency, and the unwavering right to live freely and creatively." Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our struggle for property rights. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Cedar Pines Estates. The days of petty, arbitrary enforcement were finally over, and a future built on respect for individual rights was within our grasp. In the weeks following the historic vote, Cedar Pines Estates underwent a remarkable transformation. News of the rescinded fines and the sweeping reforms put in place by the HOA board spread rapidly throughout local media and on social networks, igniting impassioned debates about property rights, creative expression, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Pines" and "Community United for Freedom," celebrated the decisive actions taken to protect the rights of every resident. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHOA bullying, and #ArtIsFreedom trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand against arbitrary enforcement. Town hall meetings and community forums saw record attendance as residents gathered to share their personal stories and envision a future where individuality was not only tolerated but celebrated. Neighbors, who had long lived under the oppressive oversight of the HOA's stringent rules, now spoke proudly about their right to manage their property and pursue creative ventures on their own terms. Our homes and our art are expressions of who we are, one passionate resident declared during a bustling meeting, his words reverberating throughout the hall. The atmosphere was one of hope and renewal, a promise that Cedar Pines Estates would forever honor the spirit of creative freedom. Within the reformed HOA board and local public safety departments, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs focusing on ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary processes were established to ensure that every complaint was carefully examined and that no resident would ever again suffer from the tyranny of arbitrary fines. Our duty is to protect not only the safety but also the rights of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed in a follow-up press conference, reinforcing the community's renewed commitment to justice and fairness. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized robustly, organizing workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns designed to empower residents and highlight the importance of property rights and creative self-expression. When we stand together, our voices are powerful enough to dismantle even the most entrenched systems, a respected local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite in the pursuit of a more inclusive and equitable future. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. My decision to stand up against HOA Karen's repeated harassment by replacing my fragile mailbox with an unyielding steel wall was not only a reclaiming of my property rights, but also ignited a broader movement for creative freedom in Cedar Pines Estates. Neighbors, once too intimidated to speak out, found their voices and rallied behind the cause, sharing their own stories of resistance. The digital evidence that showcased my bold act of defiance became a beacon of hope, a rallying cry for all who believed that property rights and individuality were sacred. Karen Miller, once the feared enforcer of the HOA's draconian rules, was gradually reduced to a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is above accountability when a community stands united for justice. Her influence diminished as digital records of her previous transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the urgent need for reform and the perils of unchecked power. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Cedar Pines Estates, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered beneath the gentle glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Property Rights" was proudly displayed between towering oak trees, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate the victory of our rights over arbitrary interference, a victory for every creative soul and every homeowner in our community, Councilwoman Carter proclaimed, her voice resonating with unwavering determination. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protecting our freedoms and ensuring that no one can abuse public power again. As each new day dawned over Cedar Pines Estates, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how HOA Karen's relentless assault on my mailbox was met with a bold, steel-clad rebuttal became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of private property and the right to express oneself freely. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Cedar Pines Estates, truth, justice, and creative freedom would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Cedar Pines Estates would forever be a place where creativity, integrity, and respect for individual expression shone brighter than any arbitrary rule could ever dim.